Up here in Carlos Bay, working both the eastern shoreline and the western shoreline. We're starting to see these fish starting to show up on some shell on a pretty consistent basis now. Water temps have been in the low 80s now for a couple of weeks. Had to deal with some wind issues this past week, so we were trying to get into areas that we can just kind of tuck and get out of the way. You know, providing that we could get there safely, but then we'll get on some protected shorelines and see if we couldn't locate some fish. So shell bars and reefs are starting to become a priority to work, primarily for our trout. And then, of course, our shorelines and those little edges that are in and around some of these places here, like you get on Belding's Reef as you work through here. All this here, tides were a little bit on the lower side, I would say, but it was pretty normal for the most part. Moving this time of year, like I say, we've had some pretty big winds this past week, so water was being pushed around a lot, so that's something we had to take in consideration for. So we fished, inside of Belding a lot just to stay on that protected side, and then get up here in and around these areas here, and then get on the inside on the backside of Dunham here that works all this shoreline to the point and all that, so we could get some protection from that side as well. So there's a lot of these areas, Carlos, the fingers of Carlos, certain parts of Spalding, and Mesquite does the same thing. When you get these big heavy winds that come blowing there, you're 30, 35, it blows everything out and just becomes real difficult. Chocolate milk. But the great thing about our estuaries up here, this water cleans up in about another 24 hours. It's back nice, beautiful green again. So that's the good side to these big winds that we've had. But we spent some time on these shorelines, both sides. Like I say, a little bit of fish. We found some fish, some redfish there on the Belding Reef, some black drum in there, a few trout scattered about. But again, what I was talking about, the reefs, are starting to see those trout show up on that. So up there in Carlos, you've got a couple of sections here. When you come through the mouth of Carlos, you've got a big, huge reef that runs right up there to the old ICW, and you got a few satellite reefs that are out here just away from it. So we worked in and around some of those, found a few fish, nothing of great numbers, but it's just another little indicator as we're getting closer to summertime. We're roughly 12 days, 13 days out before we're in June. So these are going to be the prime location. So I'm just trying to see if these fish are starting to show up on big numbers. So those are primarily the areas that we're going to like to fish when the water temps start getting in the upper 80s, which with the past temperatures that we've had, ambient wise, we're touching 90 as it is. So that just lets me know that maybe our summertime is going to be pretty hot this year. So those are the types of areas that you're going to really want to target. So shell bars. So the sooner that those fish show up for us in those particular areas, you can spend more time fishing in and around those areas. So again, like I say, we're trying to get out of the wind for the most part, just get on protected shorelines. Working through here, just found a few trout and redfish scattered out down the shoreline. We even got back up here in Belding Lake, fished all this whole back shoreline back in here. Made a little run through little back lake there on one of the days we had some pretty high tide, so we just kind of worked back through there just to see if there's fish. Found a few redfish scattered out back in those areas as well. But primary baits in our down south was the Big Papa, Twisted Tea, and the watermelon red and white ice mainly. And we're on the back side of that big moon, so we stayed in a small profile in the burner shad primarily. Sprinkled in a few original size of the down south in pretty much the same colors. Had assorted different results with those, but most of the production came off the burner shad for us in those particular colors. We may have probably sprinkled in a few other flavors in there as well, but those were the main ones that stuck out in my head this past week that produced the most for us. And again, another thing in the mirror lure, it's a trend that's happening here. And it has that same flavor in the mirror lure, the Double D, which is a terrific color in that as well. You have the right kind of water, that Double D, and that Truth is really good. But the mirror lure Little John and the XL in the Truth flavor did very well for us. Great color, great color scheme that's on that, and just got a lot of good production off of it, both trout and redfish. So if you do not have that particular flavor in your box, you may want to stop by Tackle Town over there and pick you a bag of them up. It's a good one to have in there. And then, of course, our knock greenback was the one that stood out the most for us as far as when we had that thrown. Sprinkled in a little bit of top water bait here and there, but didn't throw it primarily. Stuck mostly with the plastics this past week, just kind of working those areas. Again, the majors and minors were our key time frames in which we located and we found fish during that time. So make sure you always incorporate those into your fishing day. What estuary that you're fishing in, there's bait stacked all over the place. So once you establish that, and you say if you can get you a minor or major lined up with your time frame, hard packed sand, grass. A lot of these fish, trout wise specifically, are pushing up on these grass. So you still have an opportunity to catch you a fish of a lifetime in some of these areas if you can kind of target the right flat, the conditions just right, and the structure's just right for you, that you may get that fish of a lifetime. So there's still a lot of them heavy with eggs. So anyhow, pay attention to what's going on with your upcoming week weather-wise. We've kind of been all over the place. Looks like we're going to have a pretty warm week upcoming. So if you get the opportunity to be out on the water this upcoming week, enjoy yourself. So out here on Mud, here we go, man. Mud Island's starting to light up. You got beautiful grass that's out here on the point. You got grass that's down here on the side of that, and you got great guts that are in and down in that. So if you've waded all this area around here, you've got some terrific locations. A lot of trout are showing up in and around here. Fish on the front side. All this out here, the outer bar, closest to where the oyster farm is, on that front side of Mud. There's a sandbar that's you got one that's shoreline, and then you got probably 75-yard gap that's got a lot of holes and divots and guts and cuts and little deeper pockets depending on what your tide is. Then you got an outer bar that's got some spectacular grass that's on it. There's some beautiful fish that are hanging out on that. We're seeing that. These fish are, trout-wise, these are what you really want to target, especially if you're going to keep a few of these. I know you only get 3, but still, these fish are, 18, 19 and a half, pushing 20 on a consistent basis. And that's what we've been seeing all the way down the shoreline toward the point here of Mud. And then, of course, you can cut through on the backside here, and you got a lot of shell that's on the backside of this, which fish are hanging there. So we had more water on particular days this past week. So we kind of just see if we couldn't just kind of cherry pick in some of these back lakes, see if there weren't some fish hanging back in there. Pulled out a few redfish, no trout. But that's okay. You can get back here in Kelly's Lake, this area back in here. Perfect depth of water, man. We're throwing the double D in there. And specifically the one that we're throwing is what I was talking about with the Miraloo earlier, was the Truth. That flavor was doing spectacular. It's really productive. It's a great bait to have, especially when you got that mid-thigh to waist-deep water. You can really suspend it over top of that grass. It gives you that just a little bit of hesitation once it starts ascending, and then, man, you should get some spectacular hits. Even though we were in the big moon phase, this past week, we had we had both kind of bites. We had some bites that were pretty aggressive, which typically were a little bit more quality fish. And then, of course, if we were catching some that were very tentative, a lot of those bites were pretty soft for the most part. And those were mostly our smaller fish. They were in that 14 to 16 range. But the better fish, their upper slot, and even the few fish that we caught that were out of the slot were quality fish, and they were smoking our baits, man. So it's really good to see that. And this is going to be the trend here for the next 2 months. Mud's one of the areas that holds fish pretty much from late spring into fall consistently on one side or the other of it. It just kind of depends on how you want to work it, and you got the outer bar that's here, and you got the little gut that runs down that, and you can work that all the way up here on the edge to the point, and you've got that drop off continues out. Just work down that edge there, especially when it gets a little bit warmer. Those fish are going to drop off a little bit deeper, and those opportunities will present themselves. Again, beautiful grass that's out here on the point and around the face of Mud. Again, the same baits we're talking about in the down south in those particular colors, the white ice, Big Papa, Twisted Tea. Another flavor that we threw in there too in the burner shed was the Purple Rain, and it held its own as well. So it was a very good color for us as well. Watermelon red, that's just a good old standard go-to. Doesn't matter which bait company you're using. If you can find their watermelon red in that particular flavor, you typically are going to do all right with it. Again, the Truth and the Mirror Lure Little John was a main one we threw with that. We found a little bit cleaner water on particular days, so we threw the kitchen sink in there and the Golden Red Glitter from time to time and did pretty good with it. But the Truth was the one that really stood out, that produced the most. And along that same color frame, that's where I was talking about the Purple Rain in the down south. It did pretty well as well. Knock and Tail Green, the greenback was the main one for that. Did not throw any of the Pav lures this past week, just simply because just a bigger profile, and just the same with Coastal Brew. They had the bigger profile, so we just stuck with those 3 to 4 inch baits this past week, just to deal with the big moon and those conditions that were presented to us. Most of our opportunities came around our minors or our major time frames. Particular days you could not get out there this past week because of some of the big winds that we had, so you really looked for protection. But the days that it did present itself, we had some really good quality days out there on that. Up here in Mission Bay, Mission Lake, Mission River, the whole area up there. I know you cannot see the back part of this map, but if you've been in Mission Bay much, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These outer edges out here on the points, the corners on either side. You know, you've got some scattered shell, especially on the inside here, and you've got a lot of different little small shell reefs that are all back out here in the middle of Mission Bay. We're just checking to see those, and what we did on the one day that we did go up in here, we tried to choose our day wisely. Just didn't want to battle with Copano Bay and on just rough conditions. We just did a little drift trip over the top of these just to see if there was, if we got trout showing up on some of these reefs, see if there's some redfish that are showing up on these reefs. Pleasantly surprised, we did find more trout than anything else. We found the few redfish that we did catch, they were in that 14 to 16 range. But it's still a good sign to see that. So it means they're getting in there. You're seeing some productivity in there, but it's nice to see the trout. And again, the trout were all pretty nice trout in and around some of these shell bars and shell reefs that are scattered out and about there. If you fished Mission, you know what I'm talking about. We like to get on the back shoreline where the river comes in, fish that, fish around the mouth, fish up in the mouth just a little bit. It gets pretty squishy if you try to get too far in there. And there's one of the lakes that's just right there off of the river that's off to the right as you head back up into it. That is wadeable, but it's pretty muddy. It gets pretty soft in there. Can you deal with it? Yes. Just depending on what your skill level is, if you want to deal with it. But we kind of went back in there to see if there was maybe some redfish that were hanging back in that. Did not find any. Then just kind of fished around the back edge on the other side of the mouth all the way back into Mission Lake. Got back in Mission Lake and fished some of the edges, the shorelines in and around that. Nothing, I don't ever fish the middle of it. I just fished the shorelines. You got a few little mouths, kind of little creeks that come off of that, and we just worked around those. Had some moderate success, some smaller trout, and again, smaller redfish. No redfish to speak of as far as slot redfish anyway. But those fish there's fish that are in there. That will continue, that trend back in that area will continue to get better. Fish will continue to show up in there. And then, of course, you get up here around the mangrove edges, and you got a bunch of little, I guess you could call them a back lake if you want. They're just little pond areas that dump out. Just work the edges of those, work the mouths of those, and you got some little shell pads in here and that. We're just kind of working around those to see if fish are consistently hanging around that. Your little gut that fish through here, and then of course you got this outer edge that's around that. And that typically, as we get a little bit deeper into May and then we get into June, those trout will begin to consistently show up on that. So that was primarily what we did back in there on that one particular day that we spent back there. So try to cover it best that we could just to see what was going on. Like I say, not great numbers, but the few fish that we did catch, they were pretty good fish trout wise. So we're still looking for redfish to show back up in there, and they're any given day they can be in there. If you fished enough, you know that. So again, same flavors would have been mentioned on the other two videos: Big Papa, Twisted Tea, White Ice, Purple Rain, Watermelon Red that's in there. The OJ Shrimption was another one. That's that real bright orange on a day that we had really dirty water. We tied that one on and had a little bit of production with that. But that, to me, is a very specific bait on for specific conditions. The other ones are pretty much throw all your conditions, but when it's just super dirty. But that, Again, the knock and tail, not a whole lot on the heavy metal or the Rogue. Did very much in any of the other systems or up in this base system. Of course, we didn't throw it that much. Didn't throw the double D in here. Again, on the back shoreline, I like to throw the top water bait in there just to see if we can get any type of reaction there. Not a whole lot of activity on the top water bait. Again, it's a real. Sometimes those bites in and around the big moon, it's a little bit more difficult. So again, that's why we stayed with the smaller profile stuff, the burner shads or the original size things. Nothing more than a 4-inch. The same baits, same flavors that we've been throwing. And that'll be pretty consistent as we head into the summertime. We'll see if probably sprinkle a little bit more greens into that. Another one that down south has called Easy Money, and that's a terrific bait as well, especially in that cleaner water that's stained. They got the original size in the burner, and it was another good flavor as well this past week. So anyhow, Mission's one of those bays that you get into it. You got to spend some time in there just to really work it to see if you can get your best production out of it. Just, again, work it in and around a major or a minor to give yourself the best opportunities, specifically as we're coming off this big moon. We're fixing to head into those wild card days, as I like to say, a transition moon, headed toward a new. So just take that into consideration in this upcoming week.